October 25th, 1415, St. Crispin's Day. A small, starving English army, ravaged by sickness and exhaustion, stands cornered on a muddy field in northern France. They are outnumbered at least 5 to 1. Before them, a vast, glittering host of French nobility, the flower of French chivalry, waits impatiently for a glorious, inevitable victory. What happened next would become one of the most astonishing underdog stories in military history. This is the story of the Battle of Agincourt. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button below for more historical videos like this. Our story begins in the midst of the 100 Years' War, a sprawling conflict between England and France for control of the French throne. In August 1415, the young and ambitious King Henry V of England landed in Normandy with an army of around 12,000 men. His goal was to enforce his claim to the French crown through a show of force. His first objective was the port city of Harfleur. The siege was supposed to be swift, but it dragged on for 5 brutal weeks. By the time the city finally fell, Henry's army was a shadow of its former self. Disease, particularly dysentery, had swept through the English camp, killing thousands and leaving many more too sick to fight. With winter approaching and his forces depleted, Henry had a difficult choice to make. A direct return to England was the safe option, but it would look like a retreat, a failure. Instead, he chose a far riskier path, a long march north to the English-held port of Calais. It was a gamble, a defiant gesture to prove he had not been defeated. As Henry's weary column snaked its way across the French countryside, their situation grew more desperate. Food was scarce, the autumn rains were relentless, and a massive French army was shadowing their every move, cutting off their route to Calais. The French, led by the Constable of France, Charles d'Albret, were confident. They had gathered a formidable force, estimated to be anywhere from 30,000 to as many as 100,000 men, though most historians settle on a figure around 30,000. It was an army brimming with heavily armored knights and men-at-arms, the elite of French society, eager to crush the impudent English invaders and capture a king for ransom. Finally, near the village of Agincourt, the French blocked Henry's path completely. There would be no escape. The English were trapped, forced to fight against impossible odds. Henry's army had dwindled to perhaps 6,000 men, 5,000 of whom were his most crucial asset, the longbowmen. These were not knights, but yeomen, commoners trained from boyhood in the use of the formidable English longbow. They were lightly armored, carrying a bow, a sheaf of arrows, and perhaps a small axe or sword for close-quarters fighting. The remaining 1,000 were men-at-arms, including Henry himself, clad in full plate armor. They were exhausted, hungry, and sick, but they were professional soldiers, disciplined and loyal to their king. Facing them was the magnificent French army. Thousands of knights and men-at-arms, encased in the finest plate armor money could buy, sat astride powerful war horses. They were supported by infantry and crossbowmen, but the core of their strategy and their pride rested on the devastating charge of their heavy cavalry. The night before the battle was grim. The English, cold and soaked, prepared for what many believed would be their final day. Across the field, the French were so confident of victory that they reportedly played dice for the English nobles they would capture the next day. The battlefield itself would play a crucial role. It was a narrow plain, recently plowed, flanked on either side by dense woodland. Crucially, days of heavy rain had turned the ground into a deep, clinging quagmire of mud. For the French, this narrow front meant they couldn't bring their superior numbers to bear all at once. For their heavily armored knights, the mud would prove to be a treacherous, exhausting trap. Henry, a shrewd tactician, recognized this. He positioned his small force defensively at one end of the field, placing his men-at-arms in the center and his crucial longbowmen on the flanks. He ordered the archers to hammer sharpened, 6-foot stakes into the ground in front of them, creating a deadly fence to impale charging horses. As dawn broke on October 25th, The two armies faced each other in a tense standoff. For 3 hours, they waited. Finally, Henry knew he had to provoke the attack. He gave the order, and the English army advanced a short distance, a hugely provocative move. They replanted their stakes, and the longbowmen unleashed the first volley. The sky darkened as thousands of armor-piercing bodkin arrows rained down on the French lines. This arrow storm goaded the French into action, just as Henry had hoped. The first wave of French cavalry charged, but instead of a thunderous, unstoppable force, the charge quickly descended into chaos. The narrow field funneled them together, and the deep, sucking mud slowed their horses to a walk. They became easy targets for the English archers. Horses screamed and fell, throwing their heavily armored riders into the mire. The charge disintegrated before it even reached the English line. Then came the main French assault, a massive wave of dismounted men-at-arms, trudging slowly and laboriously across the muddy field. Encumbered by 60 pounds of steel plate, they sank into the mud with every step. The advance was agonizingly slow, and all the while, English arrows fell upon them, finding gaps in their armor, piercing visors, and creating havoc. By the time they reached the English line, they were utterly exhausted, barely able to lift their weapons. The smaller, more agile English force, particularly the lightly equipped longbowmen, who now joined the fray with axes and swords, fell upon them. The battle became a brutal, desperate melee. French knights, weighed down by their armor, slipped and fell in the mud, unable to get back up. They were trampled by their own comrades or dispatched by the English. The sheer press of bodies was so great that many suffocated, crushed to death in the mud without receiving a single wound. The French nobility was being annihilated. A second wave met a similar fate, piling up on the heaps of the dead and dying from the first. In the midst of the battle, a controversial and grim event occurred. A French raiding party, led by a local lord, had attacked the lightly guarded English baggage train in the rear, making off with valuables, including one of Henry's crowns. At the same time, the remnants of the French Third Line appeared to be regrouping for another attack. Fearing he was about to be attacked from both front and rear, and with his small army already tasked with guarding thousands of high-value prisoners, Henry made a ruthless decision. He ordered the execution of the French prisoners. It was a shocking breach of the chivalric code, but in the heat of the moment, Henry saw it as a brutal necessity for survival. His men reluctantly carried out the order, ensuring the French army could not rally. When the bloody work was done, the field was silent, save for the groans of the wounded. The English victory was total and utterly unbelievable. The French losses were catastrophic. While exact numbers are debated, it's estimated that as many as 10,000 French soldiers were killed, including the Constable of France himself and a huge portion of the French aristocracy. 3 dukes, 7 counts, and over 90 barons lay dead on the field. The English losses, by contrast, were astonishingly light, perhaps numbering only in the low hundreds. The impossible had happened. The starving band of brothers had triumphed. The aftermath of Agincourt sent shockwaves across Europe. For France, it was a national disaster, a humiliation that decapitated its leadership and plunged the country deeper into civil war. For England, it was a moment of supreme triumph, seen as divine proof of the justice of Henry's cause. Henry V returned to England a conquering hero, his reputation secured for all time. The victory paved the way for the Treaty of Troyes in 1420, which named Henry as the heir to the French throne. Though Henry would die just 2 years later, and England would eventually lose the 100 Years' War, the legend of Agincourt endured. It became a powerful symbol of English resilience, the story of the underdog who, through courage, discipline, and a little help from the mud, defied all odds. It remains one of history's most dramatic and inspiring victories. Thank you for joining us on this journey back to the muddy fields of 1415. If you enjoyed this dive into history, Please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting the notification bell so you don't miss our next story. We'll see you next time.